welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And with me, Robbie.
And this week we return to our Book v Film feature with American Psycho.
Yes, we are dipping our toes yet again into the literary world as we sit here in our smoking jackets pretending that we know how to read. So, I mean, it's interesting because I've watched the film quite a lot.
Yeah.
And this was the second time I've read the book, but I feel like I haven't watched the film so close to finishing the book. I feel like there was always like a couple of years period between them.
Yeah. And
I always remember it being kind of a relatively like close enough adaptation. Obviously, it's a lot of the the graphic murders and
there are in terms of like what can happen on the page compared to what actually happens in the film have quite some big differences. I think
there's moments definitely, but it almost feels like there's I guess because we're not looking inside Patrick's head, I feel like there's a bit more ambiguity in the in the movie almost.
Yeah, there's a lot for the audience that have to kind of figure out, I think,
or just even try to piece together or
wonder why he did that.
Yeah, well, not just why he did that, but we'll get to the moments when we get to them. But there's also like a lot of some moments of world building that aren't quite in it. I found. There was some stuff that I feel like you can't really, or that they did really adapt well. I'll do our cheap plug before we kind of get into it. So obviously, if you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and make sure to leave us a lovely review. But it opens up with this kind of like really nice orchestral piece, and we get like we're at like one of these places where they're having dinner, and all of the waiters are kind of reading through what the specials and the menus are, and they're all reading in this very same public service kind of retail voice.
Yeah. And
we're introduced to Patrick Bateman and a couple of his friends, and they all, in the book, one thing that I think people probably would struggle with, but I found really interesting, is Patrick obsesses with what everybody's wearing. Everybody, he talks about the suits.
I mean, all product placement.
All really. Product placement.
Everything, like even the food, like he's specific about certain food. Like I think, you're right. Every bit of clothing or every kind of electrical device or every kind of like
down to the model, everything.
Every little detail, like in a like almost kind of on the spectrum kind of level of that, that we get.
So I feel like whilst obviously they can't do that they probably could, but it wouldn't come off as well. I feel like one thing that they do really interesting is the cohesion between everybody. Like everybody in this film pretty much looks like, apart from Louis Carruthers, everybody kind of looks very identical. They all have the same haircuts, the suits they rotate, even the colours they're wearing are just very different shades of each other. So I feel like that's a kind of a good way in which they've brought in this, a lot of the times, overly kind of descriptive product placement, and they've kind of given it to a visual medium.
Because we do get the we get some obviously internal narration from him, and we do occasionally get him saying things out loud that show his knowledge of these different products, these different types of clothing and things like that. He does sometimes mention the inner monologues that we get within the film are kind of occasionally verbalized.
We do get a couple,
and in certain scenes, as I said, like with each of the characters there, they're all in, different models, different types of clothing and stuff like that. But I guess they are all perpetuating the same kind of idealistic view. The reason they are like so similar, like they are in the book and in the film, they're all kind of that parody of that 80s
Wall Street,
Wall Street, the wolf, like the guy that is, because the most obvious, interpretation of the book is the fact that it is the parody on the guy that is they are literally killers. They call people on Wall Street killers because they are literally, So that's the most obvious way that you can look at each of these, but it's also because, and the part that makes Patrick Bateman interesting is the fact that he's almost a person that doesn't want to be, and you get this in the book and the film, that he doesn't want to be almost this life that he's lived in, but he socially wants to be accepted.
Yeah.
So he is like everyone else, even though he doesn't want to be the person who is like everyone else. He doesn't want to follow the, I don't know, whatever it is, the latest issue of GQ that mentioned in both of them. That kind of, you've got the, you know, the fact that he has to, like, that exact model, I want to look exactly like that, I need to look exactly like this, I need to have this kind of haircut, I need to have this skin regime.
This is what I need to wear in these situations.
And like the scene when we see him doing like his daily skin regime, he's got, you know, something that in the book is read as like, he explaining that he, in his head, doing that he starts by doing this, he does a run for this long, he only eats this specific food, then he'll do this, and he has to do this onto his nose for this long, and we get these big long, you know, which again, like I've heard a lot of people who read the book, and I've seen people who have mixed reviews on this, because some people are fully into it and some people are like, why am I reading a list? Why am I reading a long ass list of someone talking about every single detail, which I think is actually a brilliant way to show how someone is intrinsically looking at every specific detail. So if you feel frustrated by that, that's the point. You're meant to somewhat be like that, because that's almost the way that Patrick Bateman's brain works. And you are fully like,
it's his worldview.
It's hard to show a character in depth by not doing, you know, something like, you know, the way he shows it helps you to actually understand the character more than you probably do most of the time with most written characters. And yes, it is a hard thing to translate that into film.
It's very hard. But another point for that is, you also notice that there are moments where he will skip over, like, people that he's murdered or women that he's raped. He'll mention it in like one line. But then he'll give like a paragraph, 2 paragraphs to what everybody is wearing, what drinks they're having, what the restaurant that they're in is like, why they're there, you know. And it's
the Patty Winters show.
What's on the Patty Winters show,
which you see the change in him across the book based on just things like the Patty Winters show. At first, it sounds like things that would normally be. It has no relation to his life, and then suddenly it starts being things like, he's just killed someone who's a homeless man, and now on the Patty Winters show today, we're talking about homeless rates in. It's like, oh, that's weirdly lit, and then you've got other things that keep going until he gets like Bigfoot.
It's so weird.
And then it's just like, okay, so we are now into surrealist territory kind of thing, and that kind of. But that's kind of the brilliance of how you follow it in the book and things like that. But it is. You know, it's not that it's like, it is very scatterbrained, you know, in that kind of way. It's very like following someone's brain, and you're following their mind and that kind of thing, you know. And that's, you know, in the film, I think, in order to show that, it has to be a lot more like, there's little elements of things like around the apartment, or where there are certain scenes when you see he's got things laid down, or you can see like plastic tarping in certain rooms, or see it as like, well, why has that been there? Obviously, a scene that is in the book and in the film, you know, where he has the sheets and he's talking like horribly to the owners, the Asian owners. And he's shouting and screaming at them, and that's both it's almost identical scene in the book and the film kind of thing. But they're both like, he talks to it, like, except for like, we get a little bit more of the woman that comes in. We get a bit more knowledge of her. We don't really know who she is. She's a throwaway character in the film. And in the book, I'm not saying there's more to her, but because you can describe her, he talks about his relationship with her and what he thinks about it. You get the whole run through of his brain of what he thinks about it, and it has to be shown more like visually, which I think is done as well as you could. There is no way to do it unless you have the whole film where Christian Bale is narrating every single bit, and it simply wouldn't work.
But I also feel like one difference that I picked up, and I don't know whether you did, but, you know, talking about, you know, the Asian dry cleaners, and he's trying to get the blood wiped out of his sheets. That's a great scene, because you see him the night before, and he's walking alongside that woman, and then he says like good night to her or something like that, and then they walk across the road together, and then the next he's in there and he's shouting and he's trying to get the blood out, and there's a lot of that throughout it. But I got the impression, and I got when I was reading the book, I got the impression that Patrick Bateman kind of goes there a lot, and he says he goes there a lot.
Yeah.
And I got the impression that the laundromat owners were still doing it. However, watching it, I got a different impression that they almost knew that this wasn't Cranberry Apple, and they didn't want him doing this at all, and they knew that he was a serial killer. And I was kind of thinking, is it because they're not in that stratosphere that they're not blind to this? We get the famous thing in the scene, in the opening scene where they go into the bar and they're in the club, and he says, you're an ugly bitch, I want to stab you and play in your blood. And that's within like the first 5-6 minutes. In the book, that happens kind of much more into it. I think maybe like 40-50 pages into it, before the violence and before this.
There's quite a lot of that combined in like from the film, obviously condensing it down.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a lot of things that are actually combined together to streamline it, because again, you've got pages and sometimes just chapters of just him talking about what's
music
around him. So amazing for world building, but a lot of it is thrown away from the script. It's the same with one of the best thing one of the best things about hearing his like inner thoughts is both being like interested by it and then disgusted by it, and also then having the weird factoids. Like the one thing that translates obviously is the musical part of it. The music where he talks about Phil Collins, and he talks about Whitney Houston and stuff like that. And you have those and who do this in the news, and you get spats of it. You don't get always as long. In the book, you're talking about basically there's a whole chapter that's basically just Whitney Houston.
Chapters,
about her career as well. You get this more condensed down into scenes. But they're not actually said out loud to people. Now, this is one thing that I think is different in the film, but I think is good as it obviously I liked listening to them in like the reading them in the book and stuff like that. But in the film, I think I actually found it weirdly scary when he's actually saying that stuff to someone before he's going to do it. I actually found that that's one difference from like the way they've translated that onto screen, and not necessarily a difference. The other one works perfectly within the way it works in the book. But in the film, it was a really clever way to do it of him because it made it the fact that he's saying this stuff and he doesn't give two shits if anyone actually gives a crap about it. It's one time when Patrick Bateman is not completely neurotic about what everyone else is thinking of him. When he's talking about those things that he's interested in, almost as if you almost get a flash into, this is in the film version, you can almost read into him the fact that he's almost so used to saying what he says and the fact nobody really cares. Yeah, nobody really listens. That he knows that they don't give a crap, but he's like, I am telling this anyway. And my brain's somewhere else anyway, because that's what makes it menacing, is the fact he's saying such light-hearted, whimsical things about, this second album by Who in the Lewis and News when they really took off, and things like that.
It's just
and Christian Bale's performance is phenomenal.
He's incredible.
He is so good. Like, he literally is. It's a hard, it's a hard idea. It's a hard act. I know that they're thinking about making another one with Luca Gardi. I can't remember what his last name is. But he's making a. I've heard several people. The first one was Timothy Chalamet, who I'm saying he ain't Patrick Bateman.
He's not.
And Jacob Elordi, as much as I've seen him in several things now, and I still don't think he's actually a good enough actor to pull it off.
No.
And the most recently I've heard Patrick Schwarzenegger's going for it, who look-wise,
and he was in the latest series of White Lotus. And he was playing a yuppie, and he was quite good in that.
Yeah, he's the closest to Patrick Bateman that I've heard of the casting.
I could imagine that.
But at the time, Christian Bale was just exactly that character. You know what I mean? There's lots of actors who could do certain roles, but he just was that.
Well, they wanted Leo, didn't they? Again. However, when I was watching this, I mean, I think Christian Bale's a better actor anyway.
Yeah.
But there's just something about Christian Bale where he's kind of, you just look at him and you think like there's nothing there. Like I'm talking specifically with Patrick Bateman, not just as a person.
Christian Bale,
just as him. But he just looks like there's nothing there. And even when he's like interacting with other characters, you're like, I'm not watching like Christian Bale out. I'm watching Patrick Bateman act as a human. Like, it's so convincing. It is.
And Christian Bale, there's something about the look of him where you look at him and this is specifically just why this film has to be about image. Yeah. It had to be like, there are certain things where you could adapt a book and you'd be like, it doesn't necessarily matter if they look at that. No, this is why I'm saying, like, the actor, like hearing like Timothée Chalamet, I don't care if he does his body up and he does 1 million workouts a day to make himself look buff. There's something about the physicality. Patrick Bateman has to be a naturally absolutely beautiful man. Yeah. Which Christian Bale actually is, especially young Christian Bale, you know. But it also has to be a case of that Christian Bale both is extremely good looking, and yet he looks like at any moment he could fucking snap your neck. He could
snap your neck.
Yeah, and he's got that just in the eyes, like you said. Like it's a darkness that is just a dwelling. You understand?
There.
I mean, we know that Christian Bale can actually go off the handle anyway. There's that classic Terminator Salvation one of him absolutely fucking ripping into someone and be like, I'm surprised he didn't cut his head off, was it?
Yeah, it's very like.
But again,
he's an intense man, isn't he?
He is, but again, you know, and there's the weirdness that you can say, but you know, he was even hired for bloody Batman Begins because they saw Patrick Bateman and said there's a weird similarity between Bruce Wayne and Patrick Bateman. They're just two people basically who are wealthy families, but they went very different directions.
Yeah, so that's basically it.
But Christian Bale's Bruce Wayne is not the same as Patrick Bateman. It's a different acting style. It still is different. You know what I mean? He is different in different roles. But here, that's the other thing, you know, it's a huge task for an actor to have to pull off basically facially mannerisms, having to show off things that are in the book almost of the way he's thinking about people or looking at people or the way he's analysing people that he has to do all with his face half the time. You almost have to read into the fact that he's thinking about this, you know. And in some ways, you know, obviously the book can work as a companion piece too within the film working. It's, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be compared as being one, you know, one works on a film format because it works as a good film and one works in the book format. The same way, there are lots of things in the book that, you know, that work in a book that if you tried to film them would not make to pass. Well, I mean, you know, you'd be going for a high rating and a lot of people wouldn't be able to watch it. And there are some things about some of the, not only things that they do to women in this in this book, but also homophobic, the slurs,
the racism,
you know, children.
Yeah, like there were some.
There's no stop to Patrick Bateman in the book, which I actually think is a benefit. Actually, I gotta be honest. I actually think, I think one thing that the film does well is there's a lot of stuff there, and I think it quite well streamlines what I think are almost some of the really like strong bits of the book. Yeah. And it does get rid of the some of the bits, and this is my opinion with the book. You are allowed opinions of the book, where for me, as much as I love it as a surreal, there was a part in the book for me where around about chapter 40ish, where we just had like the death of we just had the death of him murdering people, and we're now on an onslaught where he's killed a child, he's killed a thing, you know, he's had his real or imaginary showdown with the police and stuff like that. Yeah. And then we go back to another vicious murder of women and another kind of people, and there was a certain point for me where I felt that Bret Easton-Ellis had kind of you've done it. You've established, and I felt like it got to the point, there was a point in this book when I was just like, I felt like this already could have come to the ending conclusion, and we really didn't need, there's several chapters of just non-stop violence and gratuity, which I understand the concept. Yeah. I just felt that there was a point, and there's that, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it, I just felt like, from a reader perspective, I felt like you've done all of this, and you've already done all this, and I didn't actually need more of this, and I think, which is why I'm trying to say for the film is if they had tried to go down that passage of it just getting grimier and grimier and grimier and grimier, I think it would have fallen into like a, you know, this film went from interesting to a snuff film. Yeah, you know what I mean? And like I'm not like in the book, you know, and there's an anger to Bret Easton-Ellis that I do think is bubbling under the surface of the whole book. Well, and his temper that's coming out and his violence that's coming out towards the end. more from a kind of his viewpoint, and all of the homophobic slurs and stuff like that obviously come down from, I believe, from his own perspective.
Yeah.
Of, his life as a.
Well, he was, and I read that he was obviously. I think he was a writer, so it came out in 1991, and he was very much getting kind of like isolated from life and isolated from the world, and he said he kind of like fell into this like consumerist void, and then he just kind of like started writing about it, and then eventually he stumbled onto like this character Patrick Bateman and this kind of satire of yuppies and Wall Street and almost like the life that he was living. So I think that's where that anger comes from. It's very interesting that he went to go and see a marquee, like a multiplex, and the two films were American Anthem and Psycho 3, but because they wouldn't fit on properly, they didn't have enough room, they just put American Psycho, and that's where he got the name from. Because I think the name perfectly encapsulates the book. But kind of going what you were back to, I feel like I enjoyed that because I feel like it worked, because as the book is kind of like a character study, it doesn't really have much of a narrative to it, and it's just about his kind of declining mental state and this absurdism and what's actually real, how much of this is actually happening. Whereas I agree, I don't think they could have done that for a film. I don't think it would have worked very well.
No.
So the one thing I forgot is in the book, Paul Allen, who is obviously Paul Owen in the book, he does have a similar-ish role where a lot of people talk about him like he's the dog's bollocks and like he's really cool and that kind of thing. But his murder happens maybe like 2/3 of the way into it, and then his flat's just kind of used as like another place in a storage facility almost. Whereas in the movie, Paul Allen's death kind of happens quite early into it, and that's almost the narrative is he kills Paul Allen, and then it's about the unraveling from then and Detective Kimball coming in, and almost like, is this kind of putting the added pressure on him? Because then you get the weird moments where like he's taking women back to Paul Allen's place and he's saying that, like, telling you at Paul Allen's, and you're not sure if he's doing this to throw Detective Kimball off the scent, or if he's doing it because he kind of wants to live Paul Allen's life a little bit. It's a bit kind of vague about why he's doing it, but I feel like it's a good way of giving the movie a narrative, because otherwise, you're right, you would end up just with this thing that
because you're right. The only overreaching thing, there's more to certain characters obviously in the book, and you get more time with certain characters, but it is all just kind of that kind of memoir of a psycho. Like it is just through those parts, and the Paul Allen part is that. But even like you said, in the book, that's not nearly as much. Kimball is one scene, one part.
He has two scenes, doesn't he? He has the
interview in the office,
which obviously they do with Willem Dafoe, and we'll do the obligatory.
Oh no, I meant in the book.
Oh, in the
book, he is far younger.
Yes,
he is not Willem Dafoe.
He's not Mr. Willem
He's
Dafoe.
described as someone who doesn't really know what they're doing, and again, so that's not the way he's portrayed at all. William Dafoe's character seems much more aware of what he might be.
It's the classic thing that everybody knows, but we will mention it as if we're learning people and teaching them that they had him do it 3 times. One where he knew it was Patrick Bateman, one where he didn't suspect it, and then one where I think he like maybe suspects it, and then they spliced the footage together, which is why in the book the interview is very much like a bit bumbling and a bit like
it gets much quicker to the conclusion of Paul Owen must be.
Maybe he's in London.
In London, and then after that, there's not.
We don't go out to dinner.
We hear mention of Kimball. Yeah, we hear mention of him. So he's in the first scenes in the office when he meets him, and then he's talking again. We get another scene with him talking to Jean in the office when he kind of says, "Oh yeah, I meant to come and talk to you again. Come and talk to me now." and then we get the meal one, and
the club. Imagine going to the club with a homicide detective.
Well, I mean, and I guess that's one of those that adds kind of a weird, like, in the original book, he's kind of a footnote to the polo and thing.
Yeah.
And you hear that he's being investigated in the background. There's mention of, like, but then it's decided that he is in, he is in London. So that's kind of then passed by. He's kind of gone. Whereas here, I guess he's meant to feel a bit more pressure on them. But then you also get the weird feeling of, like, although maybe one of the initial scenes was real, is the later ones real? Is the dinner real? Did he actually go to dinner? Did he actually, the same way? Did he actually go to dinner with Paul Allen? Like, or what happened with Paul Allen?
Yeah.
Or like, which again, the book starts to become obviously as surrealist as the book goes through. You start to get more and more things. You're like, well, that couldn't have happened, and there's no way this happened. There's no way that happened. But the Kimball and Paul Allen thing is probably the biggest way that in the book it's kind of makes it a bit more questionable. Or like, what happened? Because again, like, you get the scene with the sheets and stuff like that in the book, but it's easier on the page to misinterpret what that might have been.
Yeah.
In the film, it seems much more clear that he must have at least done something.
Yeah.
Like, kind of thing. It's that difference between, like, in the book, but he does so much in the book. There's no way that you can believe that he has completely imagined every single part of this kind of, kind of have that.
But it's also not just like as the book goes on, the killings become more frequent, but they also become a lot more sadistic, and it doesn't just stop with killings.
But they also and somewhat exaggerated as well.
Yeah,
that's what I mean. So it's like of how much of that kind of is the running theme with this one of this book and this film is always the running kind of, was it all real or was it not real? And there's so many parts that you could pick apart. Some of it's not real.
Yeah.
I mean, in the book, Bigfoot wasn't on the Pie Winter show today.
Well, it opens up with, in the book, the first line is "Abandon hope, all ye who enter," which is the from Dante's Inferno, top of the gate, the pits of hell or whatever. So it's kind of, it already opens up with this, like, is Patrick Bateman in hell, and is this kind of like his punishment for all of his greed and his gluttony and all of this kind of stuff and his pride, and is he just doomed to repeat this kind of life of inexorbitant wealth but not really ever being happy and not having genuine human connections, that kind of stuff? Because he, throughout the book he's dating all sorts of women, but he never
hard bodies,
but he never likes any of them, and even his friends that he hangs around with, he never likes any of them. Like, he'll mention that he's randomly having he's having dinner with people, and then earlier in the book he will be like slagging those people off, and it's all very strange.
Yeah, I mean, because and I think that's what that's why this book is so, like, there's so many interpretations of what this book is, and linking to what, like, the film is, because again, you can see, he is, like we said at the start, he is the Wolf of Wall Street. He's a killer.
Yeah.
He's the thing. He is 80s conformity of this guy, of the image of what they started to want to be. He is the Donald Trump who is not really in the film mentioned, but he's mentioned
in the book
way more in the books. He is this idol of the thing, which again, if they're going to redo it, will be interested whether they decide to take that with knowing now, because
they do briefly mention is that Ivanka Trump. Yeah, there's that kind of brief nod to it.
He has that book, and he looks stylized in the way of and I know in the film they were restricted actually from using a few mentions of certain names and brands and stuff like that. That's all over the book. The book is filled with brand names and stuff like that, but there's even the watch. So in the book, it's very specific about this Rolex watch. This Rolex watch that you do not touch. This Rolex, and you do not. And he with the women and stuff like that. And he's got like a connection almost to this watch.
Yeah.
And in the film, he just says, "Don't touch the watch," because they weren't allowed to use Rolex. Rolex said, "We're not fucking putting our branding on this film."
Yeah, I don't blame
you know what I mean? Probably the same way that, you know, Tom Cruise is not mentioned in the film.
Because he meets Tom Cruise in the elevator.
In the elevator, you know, that weird kind of like thing. In the same way, you know, he keeps going on about Donald Trump. You just probably are like, no.
Yeah.
What's this film? No.
No. Yeah. I'm not being in that.
What, he stamps a dog to death? No, I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
I did those in my Gucci loafers. I stomped upon that dog's head.
Yeah.
You know, so. You know, he is that he's that horrible, sadly 20th century guy, and also he's the male that wants to be. You know, he's that male that thinks that this is the way a male should be.
Yeah, this
is the way at that point in time that they believe a male. You know, you got that whole what was that term they used to always use for metrosexual or whatever? The guy who proves themselves and stuff was
manscaping.
Well, manscaping, yeah, but I think metrosexual was
I remember that one. That was
at one point
if you use deodorant and wash, you're metrosexual.
Yeah, basically,
he's not gay,
you
but
use moisturiser,
you're
metrosexual. Yeah, but he basically, you know, he's got in the film again to show off that branding. You know, they have stuff all over the apartment and his skincare routine, all of those different branded stuff that he goes through, all this stuff, you know, that you get. But he's constantly, and this is a nice reflection of the book as well, of the fact that he's constantly, yes, he's looking at every single brand, but he is constantly aware of, why am I doing this? Why do I keep chasing this? Jean is the perfect. Jean to him is the perfect woman to him almost in the book. Not perfect looking. Well, but the perfect person, the person I should end up with. She says literally, she's the person I'll probably end up marrying.
He says that a few times, but he's almost resided to it.
Yeah,
it's almost like he's already settled there.
But it's that's the life that he should have if he was a normal person. But he's meant to be aspiring to be the the
cream of the crop.
Yeah, he's meant to be aspiring to be a Donald Trump, not a well, in the book that's the way it is. But you know, he's aspiring to be that. I mean. And one of the weirdest things with this film and this book is what a lot of people get turned off by, is that that people idolise the look of Patrick Bateman.
Yeah,
people idolise the thoughts and the process and the look and the way he looks, and a lot of people take that, and that's why this film and this book is still so culturally significant. Not just the fact that yes, I just said about the Donald Trump stuff. It's the fact that people still idolise these people, and the thing is that people that they idolise to these levels almost sometimes get away with whatever the hell they can get away, and no one really thinks they're capable of doing anything.
Oh yeah, but it's like the Jordan Belfort thing, isn't it? Is that the irony is that the people who idolise him and the people who were he's so cool would be the exact kind of people who would fall for his bullshit and lose their money to him. You know,
He did it.
Diddy.
It's the Diddy effect.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. It's that effect that he kind of creates. But I like it's that interesting. It's that interesting part of all of this built from that idea of there are lots of people who like the idea that this is that he really did do all of this and this is all real, and then there are a lot of people that love the idea that in the film and in the book that actually this is all in his head, and pretty much all of the violence and stuff is actually just made up, and people there are points on both sides of how that
there's arguments for it,
and I'm not sure either one completely works. I think there's a lot
of
I
grey
feel there
area.
has to be a basis in some of this that is real, and then a lot of it, the further it goes along, I think becomes more and more less real and less exaggerated. For instance, the whole the cop showdown scene, which I completely forgot was actually in the film.
Yeah.
And I thought that was something in the book, and I was just they wouldn't have adapted that into the film, would they? That seems so absurd, and then it is there, but you're just it's a very weird experience. When you read it in the book, it feels so exaggerated and so over the top, someone is idolising an action movie that they've
That's
seen.
how it feels, yeah.
Whereas
it feels very spoof of an action movie, doesn't it?
Yeah. In the film, it's hard. You feel that must be in his head, and yet at the same time, you're but it's harder when you're seeing it. And you're seeing so much of it happening, and you're seeing him run past, and he runs for a hotel, and he shoots someone in the head.
But then that kind of feels like, because there's a moment where he's shooting the cop car and it explodes.
Yeah.
And then he looks at the gun.
And it is, yeah, so you've still got that surreal...
He's not believing that this is... That was capable of happening. And it is, it's a massively surreal thing. But going back to one other thing that I feel like adds to some of the surrealism in the book, which doesn't necessarily happen in the film, is throughout the book, there's all this mention of like graffiti, and it's graffiti in places that they visit that kind of often says like kill all yuppies, and it's kind of implied that like not necessarily Patrick Bateman is doing it, but like people in that Wall Street circle are doing it, and there's mentions of like other Wall Street guys going crazy and killing people who are being caught, or like a model being killed brutally by a Wall Street guy, and it's like a throwaway line, but it kind of builds that thing of like...
Well, they have the thing, because the thing with, what's his name, Tim Price, the character is, and that he's going off, and they say about rehab, but there is a mention of as if he's gone off like the other, they keep going off these insane, like, as if he's one of them that's gone off again, like when he disappears for like a good like couple of months in the book.
In the book, yeah.
And he also goes off in, there's not a big show of it, but there is a mention of him being gone in the film and then coming back in the film, but it's not, we don't know really why.
No, we don't. But it fleshes out that thing of like, maybe this is just madness, and maybe this is just happening and none of them are like aware of this, you know? Yeah. And it leans into that, like how much of what we're watching is real.
Yeah,
you know, I feel like some of the violence is definitely
it's
toned down. You know, like if you think of Al's death, for instance,
it did for the film and the time and stuff like that. The film still pushes boundaries. You know, the film, with the violence to women. You know, especially I'd say like the scenes like when he has is it Katrina? Christy, that's it, Christy. Christy and the hooker.
Yeah.
You know, that scene, implies not only like the sex scenes are quite like a lot for the films, of that time, but also the the violence implied through the when he gets all of the coat hanger and stuff like that. And again, all of that is more described in the book than it is in the film, obviously.
And even the sex is just fucking like
someone
licking someone's ass, somebody's
balls being
sucked.
It's like fucking funny. There's about 3 main like major like sex scenes I think in the book, and it's just like fucking hell, this is the kind of smut that I think everyone's into at the moment.
This is what Diddy would be into. He wrote the Diddy pie. Now
there's a big with the ladies out there. There's a big increase in the smut market.
But
at
even
the moment,
this,
so like that's got some proper like sucking on my balls and all that.
This is like proper.
But I would say, but this also adds in like the additional part of a psychotic nature to it. So again, if you like your smut books, go and read American Psycho. That will get you where you want to go.
It'll get you.
But so so it's got an increase of the level of that. It's also got the fact that it's not, so we get obviously women that are tortured, killed, but including like mention of how they are murdered, ripped apart, torn apart.
That's still genuinely the brie and the rat.
Oh yeah, the brie and the rat. Yeah, go up inside, training the rat to literally, going to obscene things. Cutting off the parts of her vagina so we can drain and drink the blood. It's like things like that. It's like fucking hell.
Because I never liked Christie's death in the film. I didn't like the whole he chucks the chainsaw down the stairs and he kills her. But also in the book, he just
I always took that because that's so over top. I always took that as I think that in my head that was a fake. Because it's just too the whole thing. He's running down
that's it.
He's running through holes. He's running past doors and stuff with a chainsaw, screaming and stuff like that. There's no way he's covering that up, which is why I assume that that's not real.
But then I guess part of it is that everybody is in their own world so much that they don't care about it. this.
I mean, yeah, with the same way that they can notice, and even when he tells people, it's like they're not actually listening to him and not hearing.
Like murders and executions, you know.
But I think there's the line between not listening and the I tried to always draw it on the logic of the actual like. This one he could have got away with. This one, This one, there's no way like you're blowing up a car, and there's no way you're dropping a chainsaw in the middle of a whole apartment building, and like slicing someone up,
catching her,
and catching her. Not only catching her, but also like that. No one is like, holy shit, like to be the other angle of like the shot at the bottom of the stairs, the person like walking into an apartment building,
just seeing that, fucking hell, yeah. I don't know, but then in the book, it's fucking brutal what happens to her as well. And you the same with like every character's death is effectively much brutaler. Like Al, you know, in the book.
Oh, it's of a sadistic nature. It's not an easy. Well, it's not an easy read at all.
Their interactions pretty much the same. You know, like he says about wanting to get a job and you know that kind of thing. I think he stomps his dog to death, but then he just like stabs him.
That's actually the one different. He actually doesn't stomp that dog to death. He breaks that dog's legs, but he actually leaves the dog alive. The film actually does. That's the one thing. The dog gets it dirtier in the film. The dog gets fully like stomped on multiple times. All he does is just he breaks the front legs of the dog, so the dog's fucked anyway. But
the reason why I thought he killed the dog is because obviously he blinds Al and stabs him, and then when he sees him again. Al has got a different dog, so I was like, he's got another dog, and he must have killed it.
To be fair, because he broke the dog's legs, so the dog's dead. Probably
the
anyway.
Dog's fucked.
But he does kill a dog in the book anyway.
He does.
So one of the more like seen as like again like where this book is more homophobic of many things. You know, and what I was going to say before of Bret Easton-Ellis is gay.
He is gay.
You know, and he, there was one thing when I had this book, and it was hard not to be, and it sounds like a stereotype, but it literally was that I literally don't think that this book would have the perspective that it has on the way that people can look at consumerism and items and stuff like that, and the way they can look at even the mention of like the AIDS crisis and the way they talk about like we're going to get this.
They talk about AIDS quite frequently.
I think you can just see that this has come from a gay man's perspective in many ways. Like not only the way that they look at the visual beauty of someone, but in many aspects, such as I just don't like. It just felt like the novel. Like I could almost see at times like Bret Easton-Ellis like screaming out that like, how do people think that this is okay? Like how do they think this? I just thought like looking at this perspective,
I didn't see it. I didn't interpret it that way, should I say?
It's just that it was like a lot of those things, and the stereotypical part of that, by the way, was the fact that like someone who looked so much at the consumerism of those parts just felt stereotypically one way,
gay.
Not the way that someone like necessarily always looks at it a certain way. But it wasn't just down to that kind of part of it. It was just the aspects of the way that there's a lot of homophobia thrown in there that has to be from a perspective of someone who's almost lived,
who's experienced it,
and the same someone who's lived through the AIDS crisis and understands the way and sees the way that other people talked about it. As if it was like it's one of the interesting parts in the book, which is I think there is a reference to it in the film about like, that you can't get it like that.
Well, they mention in the it's class. They mention in the film when they're going to go get cocaine, and he's very much like, I hear that anything can be transmitted now, and he's like AIDS, something, dyslexia, and they're like, no, I don't think you can transfer dyslexia through sex. I don't think it works like that, But in the book, AIDS is kind of like it's like a common thing.
Anyway, it's the 80s, so it was like a major thing, wasn't it? So. But it's there throughout. Every time they go or every time they're talking about a hard body and stuff like that, they're talking about how
you can't get AIDS through this way.
And even characters who like Evelyn, who is a much obviously larger presence in there, who plays a role like in parts, not a bigger role really, but she is consistently mentioned, throughout the kind of story as being this kind of this like. Cheating but loyal but horribly thing and horribly vain and horribly all of those women are described in a very vain kind of nature kind of thing. There's not there's not a lot of like ones like Jean, for instance, have like redeeming characteristics, whereas ones like Evelyn and Courtney and those ones are all very and again in the book they're not nice. You know, Reese Witherspoon obviously plays Evelyn, and then Courtney's also displayed as just a coke infused, just has no idea what's
just
going on,
addled up all the time. You know,
which is more that like she's in a short time. I think they just tried to condense the idea that she's basically just wandering through life as in a addicted haze, basically.
Pretty much, yeah.
And that's why she's just there for whoever's going to get her money, which is why she's with the
Louis
Lewis.
Yeah, the gay gentleman.
With him, but obviously in the book, she's actually, you know, again, there is more to her character in the book, and she's a much more back and forth. She doesn't seem quite so dense as she does in the film.
No, in the film she's really dense. In the book, she's just loves drugs, you know. Yeah. But in this, she seems really dense, doesn't she?
Yeah, there's not a lot else to her except for she is just there to basically be the bit on the side who's like who's basically
they're all sleeping
time in that. They're all sleeping.
They're all sleeping.
They all want what each other want.
Yeah,
like, that's it. It's a constant circle of wanting another and another.
What somebody else has, you know.
Yeah.
I think you get the scene with, you know, Louis where, you know, Patrick like goes to strangle him, and Louis interprets that as Patrick being into him, and that's kind of played out a lot more in the book. Is Louis Carruthers's kind of infatuation with Patrick.
Yeah,
it's almost like Louis Carruthers is like pretty much the only one who can tell that Patrick Bateman is Patrick Bateman. Because there's a lot of the times where people and it happens in the film, but it happens a lot more in the book. People constantly confusing him for, you know, Marcus Halberstram, and then just other random people.
Yeah,
and then that random person will be name dropped like later. You know. So,
in the book it leads to this weird kind of, is Patrick Bateman even a person, or are you someone who's somehow like taken someone else's life, or because it's like, do you even have any of this stuff? Like, we never. Do you even have any? Do you actually have money, or have you taken someone else's life and inherited, you know, or made a persona? Or
it's weird because you get the impression that there's like cliques within the book. So you have like, and a lot of them all work at like P&P, but you get the impression that like Patrick, Van Patten, I'm trying to remember the other names, Timothy Bryce, Craig McDermott. You get the impression that those four are kind of one group, and then there is Marcus Halberstram, Paul Allen or Paul Owen, sometimes Louis Carruthers, and like a bunch of other ones, and then pockets of others in the book.
Yeah,
and then he basically spends Patrick basically spends all his time with those three who are named, but then he'll randomly at some point be like, I'm having lunch with these other guys, and they'll call him by like another name, or somebody else from another group will come up to him and be like, hey, Pete Damien, we're going for reservations hereafter.
Yeah.
And one thing that happens in the film, I noticed, but not the book, is somebody, I think Evelyn says like, oh, why did he call you Marcus Halberstram?
Yeah.
You know, whereas in the book that's never said. He's trying to kind of skirt them from knowing, but people are like, oh, how's Courtney doing in front of him?
Yeah.
And calling Evelyn Courtney, and a lot of the time Patrick just kind of like moves over it.
Yeah,
you know, it's never really brought up by anybody.
No, and it does again. It like in the film, all it can really do with these little elements is kind of pay little touches to them. He has little moments when he kind of brushes Evelyn off. He when they're at the Christmas party, have that, he has little moments of like throwing us off, or like being like, oh, that hasn't happened, or like ways of getting around, or even getting around Evelyn, for instance. Yeah. All things that they don't actually play anymore. I think there's the whole the getting engaged and getting married thing is all used as a whole like thing in the book, whereas it's just a conversation that Evelyn has that again makes her just more of a completely self-centered, because it's just her basically telling him it's happening.
Yeah.
Not actually in the book he actually ends up doing it to get himself around, get out of the party and stuff like that. Whereas in the book it's just like, you want that, and he doesn't give a shit. He's not even in the film. He's completely like, he's listing off things in the book, but he still has somewhat of an actual connection, like as in not a connection, a good connection. I mean an actual. He's recognizing what she's doing. Yeah. In the film, he's completely disconnected.
Oblivious to her.
He's almost oblivious, and there is a somewhat of a. He's almost. It's only the ones that he almost has the thought. He never thinks about, and in the book, he's not thinking about Courtney or Evelyn as a victim. So he never thinks like. So
they
he's
don't
never,
enter into that range
because they are upper class and they are more money and they are worth more, and not that he doesn't have some victims that are of that. But he almost as if he knows that they're noticeable people that he can remove, or he's people that he aspires to be, like their families are of wealth. I think their families are of high process.
Where, because there's a bit where they go to the Hamptons, isn't there? And there's a moment where she's asleep and he's like thinking about doing something to her.
But I think that's because they're living like a contained life of just them, and he's having withdrawals from murder.
Yeah,
and then he's having withdrawals, and he thinks about it, but he keeps thinking that she's too like
Whereas then he ends up killing the dog, and she doesn't even notice.
He
brought her a dog because she's just like bored. So he's just like, well, I just
murders a dog inside the
surrounds it
like that. Yeah. Again, we talked about that before. That he also he murders that gay man who comes on to him in the park, and he breaks it, and then murders the.
How does he kill the dog? Does he stab it?
I thought he.
I know he stabs the man, doesn't he?
Yeah, I thought he broke the dog's neck or something, like crushed its head off. I swear he does something like that.
I thought he stabbed it and then he stabbed the old man, and because then he's worried about.
I thought it was something to do with his head, like literally cuts its head off, or so really brutal. It is extremely brutal in those ways, like the thing. But all of these things, so with Evelyn and stuff like that, in the film, it's almost played more of a he's almost completely zoned out from the ones that are not his victims, but the ones that are, he's weirdly intertwined to be focused on them as you're interesting to me because you're thing. With Jean and stuff, he's interested in her because it almost keeps going back and forth between the two as whether are you my victim, or am I interested in you, or should I keep you around, or should I not, or there's something that I like about you, but at the same time I might kill you, and there's the back and forth, but if they're not really an object of because there's no real sexual desire with Evelyn in the film, and Courtney obviously is that bit on the side kind of thing, but he doesn't seem to enjoy his time with them at all. The same way he doesn't enjoy his time with most of the people who are meant to be his friends. He's more bothered about reservations. In the film and in the book, quite often he's so
I'm not going in if we don't have reservations.
We're not going this, and you get to see the anxiety he often has in the book of in that way he's thinking about it so much. You see him sweating. That he's like that. He's overthinking. When are we going for these So it's those moments that it does it can't have him whatever he does to a dog or microwave a dog or whatever it does, killing off the several dogs. It can't have him literally sending a rat up someone's vagina and eating them out from the inside and
brie in them.
He's got because his ex-girlfriend. Who we have a whole thing because he's so insecure with his ex-girlfriend in the book. We get a whole kind of thing about the fact that he's so insecure because she's almost a rejection of him, but an older life of him. And he's that, but he knows he feels like he is. And you get this one part of the in the book where it's almost as if it's almost like he remade himself in this image because he was almost rejected by her once, and now he wants to get back at her. So in the film we get that scene, but it doesn't really have the same resonance because we don't get any of the backstory of this is someone who really makes him
I don't think we get it in the film.
She's the one that gets the bag over the head in the nail gun. That's Bethany in the film.
What?
Well, she get the one that gets the plastic. Does she get the plastic? That's in the film, isn't it? She gets the plastic bag and a nail gun.
No, that's not in the film. I don't.
Is it not?
No. What did you watch? No, the nail gun is Gene, because the two different scenes that Gene
in the film.
Yeah, in the film, he goes to he takes Jean out and he goes to put the nail gun like at the back of her head, and he says like, "What do you want in life?" And then they get the phone call where Evelyn calls, and he says like, "I think you should leave because I think otherwise I'll do something I'm going to regret." And she thinks she means banging, but he's obviously on about killing her. Whereas in the book, they go for like a coffee somewhere.
I know where I've got this from. That's why it's because it's mentioned to his lawyer. He says that he kills Bethany with a nail. He put a nail into her head. He says that he did it, but it's off screen.
It's off screen.
That's why I was imagining it, because I was imagining it in the book, because in the book it's grisly as fuck.
Yeah.
Because he literally bites her fingers off.
It's fucking
It's
wrong.
like literally he kills her in the most like disgusting.
And then he keeps like
to get back at
her,
her,
doesn't he?
Yeah, he maces her. He bites off her fingers. He stabs her repeatedly, and then he keeps her body around and like things like that. And you don't know what he's doing to it. And there's even mention of maybe that he's eating her at times.
I think he eats a bit.
Yeah, and things like that. You know, he goes to such a sadistic level in like that. Whereas again, we only get from like the lawyer scene, we get the filled in gaps of some of them. I don't know why, because it has the idea of him doing it. I don't know why, but I've literally got the image in my head of someone with the plastic bag over their head. And
well, you see a
I must have built it in my mind.
Yeah, you see a head. You just
Did I do that?
Yeah, I think you.
Where did I do this?
Yeah. You do see a head in a bag in the fridge, but I don't know whether that's supposed to be her. But the different scene that Jean gets in the book is they go for a coffee, and she's talking to him about like, like who does he actually want to be?
Yeah.
Like why isn't he like why could he never like connect with people basically? And he like has a bit of a breakdown, and then he kind of basically says like we shouldn't see each other anymore, or we should just stay to like business.
Yeah.
So that's the different scenes that Gene
which is why they also are slightly different, because in terms of like she is somewhat like he has a book of things like in the book, doesn't he, that she's kind of like, whereas in that one scene in the film when Gene's in the apartment, he has some things that he says that almost like imply of what he does kind of thing, and also why he kind of lets you know, because you're thinking that is she making it? No one else has made it out of that apartment.
Yeah,
really.
that's it. You're thinking
apart from the first time Christy and that go out, but Christy should have gone back.
Yeah, she should not have gone back.
She definitely should not have gone back. And again, that one's fucking, you know, like disgusting. And I think the child murder is, I've mentioned it several times, but the child murder is so obviously that you wouldn't expect to see in the film. It would just be too far, and it's even not like in the book. It's the fact it comes out of just it's around the stage of, again, like I mentioned before with the Evelyn where he kills the dog. It's around the stage of like a summer where he's kind of not really killing anyone, and then suddenly like just at the zoo, which I don't actually know why Patrick Bateman is at the zoo.
I don't know. Yeah, mate. It's a weird place for it to be, isn't it?
There were occasional things in the book where I kind of questioned the weirdness of those things happening. One, this one, why he's at a zoo and like basically he stabs a child in the neck and just lets him bleed out, and then pretends to be a doctor.
Yeah.
Which you're also kind of questioning, like that's another one of questioning what's actually happening here, because you still think somebody walks up and says, "I'm a doctor, I'm going to save this child. I'm doing nothing to do this," and then basically stands there and like disappears. You'd be thinking, "Who the fuck?
What the fuck was that guy?
Who the fuck was that guy?" Yeah, so that's like the murder of a young boy is a weird. It's a weird one to have in there. One that I really remember, like I said, remember thinking this is definitely a better scene than 2. So I don't remember which woman's death it revolves around. I just remember the setup in the book. So basically, I think it might be when he has like 2 women in the apartment, but again, that happens multiple times in the book. It only really happens with the Christie and the hooker, and then the later scene with Christie again in the film. But instead of having the conversation where in the film the Huey Lewis and the News and the Whitney Houston, but they have been brought into those scenes like when he's in the apartment, so whether it was with Paul or whether it's with Christy and the hookers kind of thing, that's whenever he does his little monologues about the music thing, which is standalone things of just in his head.
It's just like chapters.
It's just chapters in the book, which is again a really good way of using that. but it has. I'm losing
You've
my
lost
train of
your
thought
train
there.
of
I
thought.
had a train of thought. Oh no, it's. I remember having this really weird thought because in the book it does mention about him talking about music and putting specific music on when women in there so that they can get down to fuck. But in the book, the music that he plays for them is Les Mis.
Yeah,
it's the musical soundtrack of Les Mis. Yeah, and he keeps going on about the Idris one being that, and it doesn't mention, apart from I think one scene when he does talk about the Phil Collins thing with one of the women. Normally his go-to music with a woman is Les Mis, which I just don't know why, but I just thought, who the hell has ever wanted to get down to fuck with Les Mis' play? You know, I can hear the sun sing. Like just the idea of that, I was like. And the I was like, this might be the least, like, that's like, at least like Phil Collins I can get, you know, a bit of, you know, In the Air Tonight or whatever. But, you know, the soundtrack to that being what he wants to play in the thing just felt so weirdly unnatural if you've actually know half the songs in Les Mis. It's like, I can't think of a single song that really, really perfectly
I wonder
goes
whether it was a big thing at the time.
I think so. I mean, Les Mis
it must have been.
I feel like that. Les Mis must have been like a bit like that. 80s must have been the start. Like that was the big. You know, like people might be playing
like Frozen
or whatever. Or whatever.
Yeah, Frozen.
But
like 10 years ago, people put like the Frozen soundtrack on.
But I just remember laughing to myself in the car when I thought of someone like basically getting down to fuck and listening to Les Mis. Like that is what we get down to. We get down to fuck with that. I do. That is definitely like so. I really like the use of music in the film. Just in those scenes, and I just think bringing those chapters and bringing some of those into that, and it does have, again, like some of his inner monologue is brought into dialogue of his inner monologue in the film, but it's not used. It's not used like constantly.
No, it's used quite sparingly.
Yeah, like it's almost like at times you are there. Like I was like actually thinking like this device could have worked a little bit more.
Yeah,
like you could have brought this in more often.
Like you get it during the business.
You get more something that's more narration as well, I guess.
Yeah,
yeah. Just those scenes, you know. I guess you get the ones when he's like walking down the street, and occasionally you get to hear his narration, like he's in a thought kind of thing, and then sometimes it's just then you go long periods and it feels like it doesn't come up again. Yeah, and it's just like it feels like you could use that a bit more. Yeah,
and I wonder if they are doing another. You know, if they're doing another adaptation, I wonder how what they're going to go for with it. I wonder whether they will lean into doing a bit more narration, whether they'll lean into the absurdity and the higher violence of it. Yeah, I'd be interested to see.
I think it'll be a less straightforward look at. I can imagine it being a much more kind of oddly surrealist kind of film. Like, I kept expecting the Patty Winters show to show up in the film because I thought I could remember what that looked like on some of the screens, but it's not in there. But like that kind of, I quite liked the every conversation had to end with, and Patty Winters was one. Patty Winters. It was his constant. Throughout the whole book, like every day, his constant is the Patty Winters shit, so he has to mention what was on there. But the weird continued absurdity of where it goes was just entertaining throughout the book, and not something that's in the film. I expected like a chat show to pop up at some point to be like, here it is as a reference, but I can't remember it.
No, I don't think it did. I wonder whether they will have his brother in the new one.
Oh yeah,
because they omitted his brother completely, which I don't think was a kind of a bad move. I feel like when he meets Sean,
he's not in like tons of it, is he?
No, they just have. There's mentions of him, and then there's the one time where they meet.
Well, isn't his brother Sean in another Bret Easton-Ellis book? I believe.
I think he's briefly mentioned.
There's like some mention, like basically American Psycho is linked to Rules of Attraction, which is also linked to one other. I can't remember what the other book is.
Yeah.
But someone said like Sean is a partly character in Rules of Attraction or something, and then he's also like as if all of those films are like in the same universe kind of thing. Like, or I mean, all those books. There is a film of that as well, but I don't.
Yeah. Well, I mean. Speaking of that kind of stuff anyway, I read that there was like Patrick Bateman as a character haunted Bret Easton-Ellis so much, and just the fact that people ran away with it and this kind of thing, he felt he couldn't get away with it, that he then wrote a story where like Patrick Bateman kind of came to life, and he ended up killing him on like a yacht fire or something. It's really odd. But yeah, so Sean Bateman does first appear in Rules of Attraction, which I believe is before. So
okay,
yeah, I'm not sure. And
it's interesting the way he's decided to like link like stories that are
yeah.
And I think that story is still about like quite like wealthy kids and almost sociopathic tendencies and stuff like the way they treat each other in relationships and stuff like that. But I know was a film of it as well, but I've never seen it. I know reference of it. I believe it has Dawson
James Van Der Beek.
Dave Van Der Beek. That's who I was thinking. I could only think of Dawson then.
Yeah, yeah, I know. So I wonder whether they'll kind of whether they'll bring him up again. But no, I don't know. Is there any other kind of anything else that stuck out to you as being, either faithfully adapted or kind of changed or better in one over than the other? So I feel like we've kind of done quite a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the book you could go on and on and on.
Yeah.
Trying to stick with the film and what's in there. We've talked about some of those more surrealist scenes, like the chase through with the police and stuff like that. And we mentioned the Paul Owen, like that obviously leads it to the biggest kind of what's happening question mark at the end of like what actually happened here kind of thing.
So we have the same conversation where he admits to the lawyer about the killings and all of this sort of stuff, and then when he meets the lawyer, the lawyer thinks that he's somebody else, and it's kind of like it was a really good joke, but the problem is that you said that you were Patrick Bateman, and Patrick Bateman's such like a Patrick Bateman's such a loser, he would never be able to do any of this stuff, which is quite funny to think that like that's how other people view him,
Yeah. I think he does a lot. It's just the difference where you can have it. Like you can rationalize in the book. Obviously, he talks about why he doesn't like someone and why he want to do to them and what he ends up most of the time doing to them, kind of thing. And it's not something you can't have Christian Bale explaining every time why the nuances of what actually annoy him. Or
yeah, of course.
Or those kind of things. So he has to play a lot of it through like the way the story plays out, like for instance Jared Leto's performance, as Paul Allen in the film, like you can see why someone would be like, he seems a bit of a smarmy prick. You know what I mean? That's just Jared Leto. But but that's like the kind of thing that you're like, you have to read into that a lot more, like, and it's that hard difference that you have to, that you have to take between the book and the film. Yeah. Because they're such like it's not an unadaptable source. This is a good film. It's a good film, and it's a good adaptation, and it takes the main essence of it and adapts it as well as about I think you can adapt it. Not that there's not, I think there are plenty of little parts and left out. There are extra kind of parts in the story that I think could be added in there, and I think there's a little bit more surrealist, and maybe now with more modern audiences there is a little bit maybe more violence and a bit more things that we could edge and make it a little bit even edgier. This was at the time, this was seen as a freaking prolific kind of people like Jesus Christ, like this is disgusting. This was a proper like this could be banned kind of film. But again, now some of it now, there's still scenes that are horrible to watch. Like the dog scene is probably the hardest, the most like kind of thing with the stabbing of the old guy and the dog. I think it's the one that stands out in my head the most. But some of the other ones now, oddly, like I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing, but some of the other ones now, because a lot of it is off screen or just mentioned or you only go across to it, weirdly enough, I think the sex scenes, it has some fairly full-on like sex scenes in parts. Yeah. But I feel like you could get away probably now with more, and you could probably get away with a lot more. People like definitely. 50 Shades of Grey. So how would you like it if you get some eating out this ass and and
some balls being sucked?
cutting people up with these and sending a rat up your brie.
Oh man, that was so. It was
I don't think
hard
they'll
to
be
read.
sending a rat out of the brie, and
Yes.
I can't imagine. I mean, actually, I could imagine possibly the child one. To be honest,
I could imagine an
in a reference, it won't be like a thing. It's just more of a like him walking up and then everyone freaking out around or something like that. Not like literally stabbing.
I can imagine
and
it.
watching him drain out in his arms as he's like, I'm enjoying this.
I'm a doctor.
I'm not sure if I'm enjoying this child dying because he hasn't lived enough for me
Which
to
is
enjoy
mental.
it. Yeah. So the fact that he kills him and then actually thinks about it afterwards and goes, you know what? It's not as fun as like draining someone who's actually lived a life and I'm taking that life.
And
from
it's
them.
like the value from the world is
Yeah.
going. Like this boy added nothing. It's really fucking mental.
You're not
isn't it?
value. You're not valuable. I should have killed your mother.
You should have killed your mama.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a incredible book. But it's the double-edged sword of like you read a book that good and that has that much character to it and world building and stuff that when you watch the film, which I do think is a great film as well, it always feels as if it's not quite as good because you spend so much time in that character's head. Yeah. But you have to understand that it's a different medium,
Yeah, I mean, I think the film pretty well streamlines the parts that mainly could be done on film at the time.
Yeah.
I think it streamlines the best parts of a narrative that you can actually take from it.
Yeah, probably.
Because you can't really fully take that kind of thing. So and as I said, the majority, I really enjoyed the whole approach, the whole book, mainly as a whole. Like I kind of got a bit numb to it towards the end. As I feel most sane people should. Towards that kind of last part, those last parts of chapters where I was kind of like, I've got this now. I understand what you're going for. I understand the surrealist nature. I understand that you're kind of trying to imply what might be real and what might be.
Yeah.
But we've done more than enough sadistic stuff to make the point. So this next group of girls being absolutely slaughtered and you cutting off their vaginas and stuff is now feeling a bit like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by I think the film's quite good in the way it kind of streamlines to kind of and tries to make a narrative, and the bits it adds, like the Kimball not just being a throwaway, makes sense. The bits and stuff like that, the way it uses certain characters, even things like Lewis and stuff like that, like he comes across smart, like eerie, not eerie, creepy in that kind of way. I mean, the only thing that did throw me off with his is the actors. They weirdly whitened him up. Yeah, like he's got a weird really ivory pale, skin, but I'm like, I don't think that's your natural ivory skin. No. Like, they've put a sheen over you, but I guess that could be the idea that he puts foundation on. And stuff like that. But, there's an eerie look about him where you look like that guy's a diddler.
Yeah, he does have a bit of a diddler look.
You got them thin lips and you got
that ginger little bob.
Yeah, but it's hard to go against. I still think that throughout all of that, and no matter what they've done, but I quite happily would have watched if they'd done an entire TV series where Christian Bale is just reading and basically narrating every moment that before they came in. I think most people would be like, "Yeah, this is weird, but this is good."
I'd fuck with this.
I do think Christian Bale is a pretty perfect Patrick Bateman.
Yeah,
that's one thing I think that works. Like other characters, maybe, but he is pretty much embodies the best that you could in that. And that's the hard task for whoever decides to do it next. Is it's like you've got to go against Christian Bale.
Very big shoes, you know,
big shoes to fill. And I think the only way I can see it being different is because they'll take possibly more of the narration stuff. I can imagine. I can imagine it being much more in that style, and I think they'll take the violence to it and the graphic nature to a higher level. But there's also, I think, even now, there's still that tipping point of where people will still line up.
How much can they do?
You've taken the essence of the thing, but I think you can still take far too much from this book. Yeah. You can take too much almost. Like there's just parts of it that just don't need to be adapted.
Oh yeah, of course. We don't need the rat and the brie.
We don't need rat and brie.
There's a lot of the later stuff that you don't want to watch. You maybe imply.
As it goes on, you want to imply, and you want to imply that madness that is going on, and you want to imply that thing. I want to see Patty Winter's show, and I want to see Bigfoot just going on the show. Because even in this version of the film, I don't know why, but when I read that, I thought in my head as if there was some throwaway scene where I see a talk show, and in my head I must have imagined a talk show
I think you just did.
where Bigfoot walks on the same way I imagine everyone's like. I vividly built that into my head. like of that being there. So I was like, it must have just been like a random towards the end of the film, like a throwaway scene in the background where I just obviously wasn't paying attention. But I was like, no, I don't think it's there. So I have fully imagined that, but I could completely imagine that.
Maybe you went off into your own.
It's also, by the way, this story does also need to remain within the time frame. It can't be one of those adaptations where you modernise it, because this does not. No, it doesn't work. Well. There's like, from many perspectives, but people are just like, one, it had to be that era of it's all about the look and it's all about the money and it's all about which just is not modern day now, kind of thing. It's just not the same exactly with that. Even with the people like the Kardashians that you look at now, it's not exactly the same.
No, I don't think it'll be quite as good.
And you need to have the themes of that time to be able to really like make that work, and also just generally you need to have less CCTV and less theatricals and like Patrick Bateman walking around like making memos, narrating into his phone. It's not going to be. It's not what we really want to see. Yeah,
Well, I mean, that is our little comparison between the American Psycho book and the American Psycho motion picture. You can come and let us know your thoughts on the two, the differences. Let us know which you prefer. Whether you're a bookworm or you're a movie maniac. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at CMTH Podcast. Remember to hit that subscribe button and please leave us a lovely review. And remember, this is not an exit. See you next week. Bye-bye.